Andy, have you taken down your holiday stuff yet?
Have to, Dave. Have to. You can't start the new year out with the holiday stuff still up. It's anathema to my system. January 1st, gone.
So
Eliminated.
you're hard and fast January 1st, huh?
Has to be. Yeah. I don't want to do it a day before. You know what I mean? You can't do it in December. That would ruin Christmas. You can't do it in
Uh,
December. But also I can't start the new year out with Christmas trees and Christmas lights. Like it's got to go. New year, clean house. Got to be. How about you? Are you going to go, following through the
s-
12 days of Christmas and carrying on and
so the outdoor lights had to come out, they had to come down. Indoor is going to come down this weekend. I think if January 1st hadn't been like that attached to a weekend, I probably would have kept it up until the next weekend where I could just knock it all out. But the way it landed this year, it was just convenient to take it down. I cannot do anything in December. I've seen people who the next day they've wiped
yeah.
out Christmas from the calendar. I can't do that.
They hate
I
Christmas, Dave. Those guys hate Christmas.
yeah, so that's all good. Andy, welcome. We're at Men of a Certain X. This is our second episode of the new year. We will again, like I said last episode, we're back on our normal schedule Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Enjoy the opportunity to talk with you, Andy. Andy, we've got a lot to get into today. The big news of the week, and I think it ties into a lot of the conspiracy theories and a lot of the craziness that goes on and disinformation. The Jeffrey Epstein list came out,
Yeah.
and this, for those who may not know or are not on socials or are not watching the news, obviously Jeffrey Epstein, a very affluent individual, uh, connected with and convicted of, in fact, a lot of child pornography or pedophile type of activity. But he is also very connected to high level politicians or individuals in the public space. And of course, there's always the connections to him and Pizzagate and the Democratic Party and all the craziness, the conspiracies that go around that. He was in jail several years ago, and one day he was dead. And of course, all the conspiracies about how did he kill himself when he's so heavily protected? How could this happen in jail? Never mind the fact that that probably happens more frequently than we care to know in our prison systems. But in any event, his associate is in trial now, and the judge had ordered the release of logs that of people traveling with Jeffrey Epstein and his associate back and forth to this rape island, as they would call it, or some sort. Anyways, the release of this list, the manifest that people traveling were on there, was released this week. Some high names on there. I don't know if there was any shocking names on there. Again, this is no acknowledgement of guilt of their part of that they engaged in any sexual acts with minors or anything like that. Of course, the conspiracy spin wild. Andy, did you check and see if your name was on that list?
I didn't. I was able to sleep peacefully knowing my name would not show up on the list. So, I did review it, and there's actually a really good piece. I believe it was by USA Today on Thursday that sort of helped debunk some of those. There's so much spinning around about this
Yep.
list and who's on it, and there are definitely some prominent names on it. I think most of them were already known. I don't think there's anything new that really came out thus far. The second list came out yesterday. I think there's three more perhaps still to follow. And so far, the whole thing's mess, unfortunate, in what was occurring, but no new information has come out as yet. But there's a lot of misinformation that's come out, a lot of accusations, including nonsense from such characters as Aaron Rodgers, who's now dealing with that,
Yeah.
right? But it's unfortunate that some people are being accused and associated with things that aren't true because it's really, not a topic you want to be involved with if you had nothing to do with it, and that's starting to happen. So a good piece of USA Today sort of debunking some of the manipulated photographs, and it's coming from all corners. There are pictures
Yeah.
of Bill Clinton, Donald Trump that had both been manipulated, and lots of others, right? And so it's a good reminder we live in an age where you've got to question everything you see, don't trust anything you see, and sort of make sure you verify things before you get too excited because there's a lot of bad info out there for sure.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously the connection with child underage sex trafficking or pedophilia,
Yeah,
or however you want to term it, um, that's one thing, of course. And again, these lists are not going to say that this person engaged in this act with
right.
this underage person. That's not what this is about. I do think the troubling thing, and this is a point I heard brought up on a couple different podcasts that I listen to, or other news articles that I've been reading, is Jeffrey Epstein was not a good person. Like I know he had a lot of money and he had donated some of that to the arts and charities. That's okay. That's fine. But he was not a good person. People knew he was not a good person. He had a prior conviction early in the 20, I think it was 2008 or 2007, somewhere in that time frame, for soliciting or for like a teenage prostitution charge or something
Yeah,
to that effect. And yet these people still, because he had money and because he had contributed to campaigns and political activities, they hung out with him. And again, whether these prominent public figures did engage in it, that's not for us to determine. And I doubt this trial will determine that either. But they were connected to this individual, and they were his friends. Ricky Gervais had a great opening monologue to the Golden Globes several years back, where he poked at it, and everyone was like yelling "boo, boo." It's like, hey, he was your friend. You were hanging out
yeah,
with him. It's not.
yeah.
I'm not. This is not. I mean, you can hate it if you want, but you were there. You were the person there. So I think this is a very interesting. I think it's sad. It's extremely sad, but any event, that news is out there. That'll be dominating our news for the next while. And again, for those who are committed to conspiracy theories and all the other disinformation, this is just going to fan their fire, and add fuel to it. And it's not really going to change any opinions one way or the other. At least I don't think so, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of questions and concerns, right? Like you said, the perception of spending time with somebody who has a questionable reputation, right? When you're a well-known prominent figure, a political figure, a person of influence in different ways, it just raises questions and associations that aren't necessarily in your interest, right? But Epstein was able to use his money to gain access to individuals, to gain influence with individuals. That's what he tried to do. Whether there were wrongdoings or not, we may never know, but not a good look, right? It's not a good look to be on that list, right? David
Yeah,
Copperfield doesn't need to be on that list, right? Doesn't
yeah,
help him at this point in his life. Things of that nature. Unfortunate. It's a sensational news story, right? It covers a couple of days until, of course, Iowa politics takes everything over next week. So it'll
yeah,
a
yeah.
little life, a little life, and it'll go away most likely.
Very true. Very true. All right, Andy, let's pivot to another topic here. You want to cue up the music here,
Well, you
Andy?
know I do. You know I do.
Oh, hell yeah. Okay, Andy, another topic that's come up in the last couple days. Um, After we concluded our podcast on Wednesday, the House Homeland Security Chairman Mark Green, who's a Republican from Tennessee, announced a full committee hearing to evaluate the impacts on the country's or on the country of the Department of Homeland Security's failed leadership, the leadership of the Department of Homeland Security secretary, for his refusal to enforce the laws passed by Congress. Specifically, Andy, I'll just quote Chairman Green here. He said, "For almost 3 years, the American people have demanded an end to the unprecedented crisis at the southwest border, and they have rightfully called for Congress to hold accountable those responsible. That's why the House Committee on Homeland Security led a comprehensive investigation into the causes, costs, and consequences of the crisis, yada, yada, yada." They made it clear that the leadership was failing here, and they're going to try to impeach the Homeland Security Secretary. Andy, we've heard a bit about impeachments for presidents.
Yeah.
That seems to be common these days. Not so much for cabinet secretaries. What do you think here?
Yeah, so Dave, a lot of things that I think here, right? So,
I knew you'd had thoughts, Andy.
so, look, are there concerns around the southern border? Yes. I mean, there's definitely legitimate concerns around the southern border. Um, the reality is, illegal border crossings were down over the last month, right? The border crossing points just reopened yesterday, as a matter of fact, because numbers were down after they were closed because of some increases. there's a lot to debate and consider in regards to the southern border, our security of that border, concerns over that, in a much broader conversation about immigration and what's working and not working in our immigration system. There's fair discussion to have. It'd be good for Congress and the president to pay attention to that and have serious discussions on that topic. This impeachment inquiry, however, is not a serious discussion, right? They're not going to impeach the secretary of DHS. But what gets my goat about this is maybe one of the best examples of fraud and waste by government officials, right? And what I mean by that is there's going to be a full Senate hearing, a full Homeland Security Committee hearing on this topic. That's a lot of well-paid senators. That's a lot of congressional staff time to prepare. That's the Secretary of Homeland Security attending, right? That's a very high cost event. And there's another cost to it because while they're spending their time with the theatrics of this discussion, they're not doing other important work, theoretically, as if Congress did other important work, which is a big question mark at best. But we're paying for it, right? We, the American people, are paying for it. We're paying for them to put on this political theater, for the hearing to go on, for Congress to prepare, for the secretary to defend. And while we're paying for this, we're also at a time of as the secretary of, or I'm sorry, the director of the FBI said, of significant security concerns, right? Terrorist threats, cyber attacks, a whole lot of things that are important to the American people and have consequence for the American people. And we're taking away from that because Congress isn't doing anything to address those concerns at the same time. The Secretary of Homeland Security is being removed from his post temporarily to address this hearing. And so it's just a cycle of waste when there's so much other stuff to do. It's political theater. It's the start of the election season, right? It's 2024. Here we are. So we want to show that Biden is failing at the border, his secretary is failing at the border, and it's all for nothing except for political points. And that pisses me off because it's time and money being wasted. It's your tax dollars, it's my tax dollars, America's tax dollars. We already don't have any money. We're already in a huge deficit, and we're wasting it by paying these clowns. And that's not a swipe at the GOP. There's many things to swipe at the GOP. It's a swipe at Congress in general for this kind of nonsense theater, getting nothing done. It accomplishes nothing at the end of the day. It doesn't address the border issue in a significant way, but it does waste the American people's time and dollars just to sensationalize an issue for election points. That sucks. That sucks for America. So it pisses me off, Dave. That's how I see this exciting hearing.
I rant on college football, Andy, and you rant on the political theater here. I couldn't agree more. This is only political theater. I think that's in fact what our politicians are best capable of now is this political theater and trying to just, rally crack the whip or rally the bullpit or whatever to say, around a cause. I mean, obviously the border has been a cause for Republicans to go against Joe Biden. I don't think they can go against him against many other things because, frankly, I mean, some of those other things, the infrastructure is being improved, a lot of other things that have been working for the Biden administration. So the one thing that they keep going after is the border crossing. I don't think that the former president had any other better solutions other than to build a wall that never really always got partially funded or
Yeah,
whatever it was. But
yeah.
I think just this kind of stuff, though, does detract from the real business of the country and the real areas that should be addressed, such as inflation or some of the other economic disparity conditions across the country. There's so many other things you could tap onto, especially for the Homeland Security Secretary. There's a lot of other things that they can be working on other than to have an impeachment hearing around a cabinet level position. I mean, I think again, it's just an atrocious area there. I do find all of this it's just a fascinating area because again, the media will play up, the migrants coming from Guatemala, Honduras, coming across Mexico. They're all piling up on the border there with Texas and Arizona and California. And then of course all the migrant transitions from Texas and Florida up to outside the vice president's house, up to New York City or Seattle, wherever they want to put them. I find these to be, just I mean, comical, but also very sad. It's just very frustrating to see. This is where we are as a country. We can't really come together for a real immigration policy, so we do these tit for tat type of activities. So it is frustrating for sure, Andy.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, you said some important topics there, David, and those are the kinds of things that Congress really could have serious discussion and debate about that would be worthwhile for the American people, right? Immigration policy, how we
Right.
manage, relationships with our, one of our most significant trading partners. I mean, Mexico is a significant part of the United States, underappreciated by most Americans, but we do an incredible amount of trade with Mexico, right? So there's important things to look at there to explore, policy, security. Like there's real questions to ask and things to consider. But this hearing isn't that. This hearing is
Yeah.
is nonsense, and that's the unfortunate thing. That we're not addressing the issues that we could have really good debate about, and that would be good distinctions to make between the political parties for elections. But we're not, instead of having serious debates and discussion, really proposing genuine ideas that we can discuss, debate, and consider and vote for as American people. It's rah rah. The terrorists are coming across the border, and
Right.
there's very limited actual evidence of that. There's some concern for sure, but this kind of stuff is theatrical, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. So Dave, I'm going to hit it before we go too long. But again, these things are interesting. Good to pay attention to them. We're going to see a lot more theater though as we get closer to election time, and that's what we do as Americans. Yippee.
Yeah, they're all military aged men. They're all going to somehow come and infiltrate this country and subvert from within. It's proven out. It's happened all over our country's history, right? So, Andy, real quickly, I do want to touch on Iowa. The Iowa caucuses are a little over a week away. I
Yeah.
think they're about 10 days away. It obviously the former President Trump is well ahead in the caucuses. It will be interesting to see if the actual poll numbers are what they are polling at now. I mean, he's about 50% now. Next, depending on what polls you look at, Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley are in that 19 to 17% range, and one could be second, one could be third. I don't think anybody's really expecting any change in that. However, the polls in New Hampshire are continuing to tighten a little bit in Nikki Haley's favor. I think this is a crisis point for Ron DeSantis. We've said this before. If he's still close with nobody's going to debate who's going to win the caucus, but if DeSantis, who has the support of the Iowa governor, if he's barely beating or in fact even loses to Nikki Haley, I think that might be the end here. I mean, he may be able to last to New Hampshire, but I don't think much longer than that. What are your thoughts leading into Iowa and then New Hampshire?
Yes, I mean it is interesting. I mean, last night CNN hosted town hall visits with Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley to sort of make their case to Iowa and New Hampshire voters to some extent. Um, so what's interesting is the trend, right? So DeSantis was high in the polls, right? Last year he almost hit 30%. Still, at that time even his best 15% behind Donald Trump. But his numbers have gone down. They've slightly increased, but really stayed kind of flat, right now. And today he's just maybe a couple percentage points ahead of Nikki Haley, who's steadily risen, and who's also the last week or so kind of gotten flat in Iowa. One, Donald Trump is way far ahead. He's going to win the Iowa caucus, like that's almost certain, right? He's still got about 50% support right now. DeSantis, a little bit of Haley, and then Ramaswamy, further below that. I don't even know if Chris Christie's polling in Iowa. So like we said before, the old adage is that there's three horses out of Iowa, right? So really, Donald Trump, DeSantis, and Nikki Haley go out of Iowa and into New Hampshire, and they're all going to make their case, right? Donald Trump, the inevitable. DeSantis finishes second, which is likely. Makes the case that he's the alternative. And Haley will plead that she's bringing the fight, she's rising in the polls, and then if she finishes second in New Hampshire, which is looking more and more likely, then she's saying she's got momentum and going into this, that she's the real challenger to Donald Trump, the real alternative. It'll be interesting to see. I think this will probably, between those two, we probably will see a couple campaigns end or become, politically insignificant. And I think, who finishes second in both of those will be interesting, both by Iowa and New Hampshire, just because even though most Americans couldn't care less, what Iowa or New Hampshire do or say, like as Virginia, I don't care what Iowa voters think, but donations, finance, media attention comes along with those wins and losses. And so we're going to hear more about those that do well, those that break expectations. If Nikki Haley surpasses expectations in polling numbers, that's a big story. If Mr. Trump stumbles, that's a big story. So we're going to see. It's fast and aggressive from here, right? And
Mhm.
momentum is still, Mr. Trump's to lose. We'll see what happens. I mean, it's an interesting time. Regardless of what you think about the candidates and politics themselves, this time of season for nerds like me, I think for you, it's always exciting to see this process play out. It's part of the excitement of American democracy. It's a great thing. People go to the polls, they vote, they make decisions, they have consequences. We're peacefully, theoretically, electing our next leader, and that's exciting. And I say that, Dave, because I know it's January 6th Eve as we record this. I know that's almost exciting for you as Christmas Eve, so I don't want to take away from your excitement and joy there. But a couple thoughts.
Very good, Andy. I find it interesting is Trump has stepped up his attacks on DeSantis,
Yeah,
mostly because look, if DeSantis is out of the race, the line of thinking is DeSantis's groups or the voters for DeSantis are more aligned with Trump than they are with Haley.
yeah.
And if DeSantis is out, that means more supporters to Trump. I'd be interested to see that play out. I'd like it will be fascinating over the next couple weeks. I do think he's not long for February, so we'll see how we go from there. But all very fascinating to follow up on, and of course it'll be a topic here in this podcast as we move forward. So Andy, let's wrap up this week, but I do want to do a sports health check-in.
All
You've
right.
recovered from the Lions, not beating the Cowboys, of course. How are you feeling headed into week 18, the final week of the season? Not
Yeah,
much to play for.
yeah. Well, the Lions, I think, are going to play aggressively. I think they're still hoping that they can get the number two, right? If Dallas stumbles against Washington, and Dallas might not feel like they've got a whole lot to play for, right? They might feel pretty secure where they are. Washington has nothing to lose, right? It could be Ron Rivera's last game. Their quarterback's going to be starting, is trying to make an impression because he's probably going to be benched, at the end of the season. So they've got some things to fight for. I don't know if they'll do it, but should they win, it gives the Lions a chance to get into that number two spot. So I think the Lions are going to play, which is exciting because a lot of teams are going to be resting this weekend. We're going to see a lot of backups playing football, Baltimore, Cleveland, and others. So I think it'll be fun to watch. I'm praying for all teams, that nobody gets injured. Nobody wants to get hurt in week 18 before the playoffs. That stinks, right? So I'm hoping that those that are aggressive, like the Lions will be, don't have any serious injuries going into it. But it's kind of a lackluster weekend generally because most people don't care. Their teams are kind of set. A couple teams fighting for playoff spots. That'll be fun to see. I think the funniest thing I saw, Ian Rappaport was reporting that the Browns were resting their starters and making fun of Joe Flacco. He said, I presume Joe Flacco will be napping during the game, right? Just because of he's being joked at for his being an older quarterback. But it should be interesting. It'll be fun to see, and then the playoffs will be set, and we'll see what's going to be
Yeah.
happening in the second season there. So, how do you feel about your Cowboys? Are they going to make an impression here? Are they going to fall like they are prone to do, or you think they got this?
Well, this is we'll see. I mean, this is where I always worry about the Commanders or whatever the Washington team is. I mean, I felt this way on Thanksgiving, and the Cowboys played a pretty close game
Yeah,
with them until they blew it open near the end of third quarter, early fourth quarter. Look, Washington, they always play these games kind of tough. It is Ron Rivera's last game, most likely. Their quarterback is again fighting for a position for next year. And so the Cowboys, whether they're the second, they would love to be the second seed, especially if they would play Detroit again in the second round, getting past the first round. But if they fall to the fifth seed, I don't know if that's necessarily terrible either. They don't get a home playoff game, but at the same time, they'd play the NFC South. So I think we'll see how the game goes. I think they're going to play to win. They want to get that second seed so they don't have to play San Francisco until the NFC Championship game, but we'll see. I do find it interesting too, the Joe Flacco being rested on his last week. This is over the last couple seasons. This is when he would play because he was the backup quarterback. He wasn't well thought of after he left the Ravens, but now give Joe some rest so he can be fresh for the playoffs. But that Cleveland team, I'm actually kind of pulling for. I kind of
yeah,
like what they've become. I mean, it's a fun team to watch, and They play good defense. So I'm excited about the playoffs. I think it's going to be great. The AFC is a mess. So it'd be interesting to see how this last week plays out for everybody there. So, okay, Andy, with that, I think it's good to put the bow on this episode of the podcast and for the week. And we have exciting stuff for next week, of course. Always good content coming to you from Men of a Certain X. But Andy, I will catch up with you next time.